Hey guys, how you going? It's been a little while since I've put one up. I've been overseas on a little holiday, and I'm back and just mowing the grass. And I did notice this before I left, but I noticed it more now. Here, baby. The mower's sort of playing up, and I've had the plug out. I actually changed the plug because it conked out on me when I first started, and I put a new one in there. It ran a bit better, but it's not the plug that's the problem. It's I think the valve gap is a little bit out, a lot of soot on the plug, and yeah, it's just not running quite right. I'll give you a listen. It's nice and warm, so it should start easy. Okay, now I don't know if you noticed or not, but when I reduced the throttle down to idle and then accelerated hard, you may not have picked up there's a bit of a stutter there before it actually accelerates to full throttle, and that's what I'm getting when I come up to a bit, a large clump of grass and it tries to mow through it. You might say that's normal, but I know that's not. I've had this mower for many years, and it's not doing that. And even at light load, you're getting that stuttering. It's labouring because the air fuel ratio is not right. Now, nothing's been touched on that. It has a new plug in it now, so what says to me is that it's either letting out fuel before it's reached full compression, before top dead center. So I think the valve gap is out, and it's either opening too soon or too late, and that's why you're getting the stuttering, because it's not getting the new fuel before the exhaust port opens. I'm not sure, but we'll check the valve gap, and hopefully next time we start it, we won't be getting that. All right, let's get into it. Just a few things to remove. Leave that on there for now. Now, I only remove that because it gets in the way of this otherwise. Now, I've got to remove that plug. Now, this was a brand new plug, and as you can see, yeah, it's all sooted up now. You can see that, and that's because something's not working the way it's supposed to. Okay, so there's our valve cover. Now, it's pretty easy to find where your valves are located by, usually on the valve cover it's got OHV for overhead valve, and they are quite loose. There's a lot of gap there. You may be on the right stroke. So what I do now is I poke something into there and slowly rotate the piston Now the piston's coming up. And you want it at the point where it gets to the top, and there's a little bit of a dwell time, so there's a bit of movement where it doesn't do anything, and that's your top dead center. And then you checked, and that's not where I need to be. My valves are still tight. Alright, so we're on the wrong stroke. So we continue in the same direction until we come back up again, and lo and behold, we've got a T with an arrow there, and that's going to have to line up with something. There's the dwell. Now it's actually pointing to a bolt here. So now we have valve lash. And this one's considerably loose compared to this one. So I got a feeling that this one's out. Okay, so now the piston's up the top and we're on the right stroke, because now we're at the point where when the crank comes down, it comes down at an angle, and then when there's a point when it's right at the bottom there, sorry, where that right at the top, so the piston's up the top of the cylinder, there's a point there where it's swinging and it's twisting like this, but it's not actually moving the piston. That's your top dead center. And that's when you get when your lash is at its loosest. So now we need to adjust that. So that's the right one. We're also going to need this larger one, 14. We're also going to need what we call feeler gauges. You have your push rods on this side, because I can see the rod behind it, and here is your valve spring, and that spring is held captive underneath is your actual valve stem. So when your camshaft lifts up, pushes on your push rods, the back, that pivots the rocker and pushes down on the valve to open it. Now what your valve gap does is, the valve gap is like a fine adjuster for your valve timing, if you like. So as your camshaft wears, as your springs wear, as your rockers wear, you know, and as your valve seats wear, and your valves, you can use the adjustment on your rockers here, your valve gap, to maintain your valve gap, to maintain all that, like to compensate for all that wear. So if you maintain the valve gaps between your rockers and your valve stems, that takes up all the wear in the rest of the valve train. Okay, so on the exhaust side, and I know it's the exhaust side because when you look at the casting, you can see the port coming through to the exhaust here. And so if that's the exhaust, there's only 2 valves on this engine. The other side is your inlet. Now, I'd say it's the exhaust one, but then again, the exhaust one is a little bit looser. And this is fairly warm. So really, well, it's actually not that warm. I mean, I can touch it by hand. Should be doing this stone cold. But the engine has been sitting for a little while, so I'm not going to touch it, so it's not exactly hot. So we're looking for about, so I got 0.1 here, so we'll put that in there, and I dare say that's going to go in loose as buggery. There we go, 0.15, which is 0.006 on your imperial measurement. Put that in there. And that is still quite loose on there. Still very loose. And it's even loose on the inlet. So we're bigger than 0.15. There's 0.18. What have we got there? Well, that is going in, which I don't think it should. But it's actually a bit tight on the exhaust. So here I am thinking that the exhaust is loose, but I think it's the inlet. Because, yeah, I'm definitely getting some drag on the exhaust. So that's sitting at 0.18, I'd say, maybe a touch less, but definitely still loose on the inlet. Alright, so I'll try 0.2 on the inlet. And that's still on the loose side, so that could be our problem. Yeah, we may not be getting enough fuel, but it seems like it's running rich to me with the soot build up, so it's a little odd. 0.23, which is 0.009 imperial, and that's too, that fits in there, but it's very tight. So I think that's a little too thick. 0.21, which is slightly bigger than 0.2, but not as big as 0.3. 0.23, and that's going in okay. Still, that's probably where we are. 0.21, maybe 0.22. 0.23 was, it was too tight. I knew that. All right, I'm going to check the specs on this, and then we'll come back and find out what we're doing. Okay, so the gap we're looking for on the inlet is 0.1 plus or minus 0.02, and at present we've got over 0.2 in there, probably a 0.22, so we've got double the lash we're supposed to. So that's probably why we're getting some problems. And the exhaust is 0.15 plus or minus 0.02. So we're even a little bit loose on that, I think. Or we might be spot on with that one. I'll just check it again. I should have written it down, but I didn't. So we've got 0.15 here. We'll throw that in there. Yeah, that feels about right on the exhaust, but we've got to tighten it up on the inlet. So basically what you do is you get your 10mm and you back off the clamp. That's the locking nut on the top there. Just back that off loose, and then we tighten down on the top one. And you don't want to do it a heap because you don't need a lot. And then we'll nip that back up and we'll check it. So I'm aiming for 0.1 because it's 0.1 plus or minus 0.02. So we'll find the 0.1 in there. There we go. There's a 0.1. And I think I can't get it in there. So I've got not enough. So what I'll do is we'll do it again. We'll back that off. A little bit more. Alright, so I'm there. And I just can feel it. Maybe a bit more. Yeah. You don't want it hard, but I don't know if you can hear that noise. That's sort of a squeak, so it is rubbing, but it's sliding fairly easily in and through there. Might be a touch on the tight side. I'll loosen off a bit, maybe a bit more. There we go. So now I've got some drag. Maybe just a little bit tighter. There we go. You want to be able to feel some drag on there, but it should slide nicely. Everyone sort of has their own feel for this sort of stuff, but you have a bit of a tolerance, so it doesn't have to be exactly. But what you got to be careful is now is when you tighten this nut up, you need to make sure you put your other spanner on the adjuster, because when I do that up, you don't want it to also tighten up the adjuster, because that will throw you out. So make sure you put that on tight and nip up your lock nut, keeping your adjuster steady. Now there are different types of setups with these. Some of them have a locking nut, but then the adjuster is an Umbraco hexagon type adjuster, and that is adjusted on the top. So you'd need an Allen key to do the adjuster and hold that while you locked it up, if that was your design. And right, so now that we've made that check, we'll just check it. And I think even the lock nut pressure has actually tightened it up, so I'm going to have to give myself a little more. Alright, so even though I held it still, when I did that up, it actually tightened up on it again. So we'll give myself a little bit more valve lash and tighten that up. And now we've got some play in there, so we should be in the ballpark now. And there we are. That goes in. I've got rub, I can hear the squeak, and that's what I like. And we've got extra squeak there, so we'll just check over that one a bit. So we want, I'll just check that. Okay, so the exhaust is supposed to be 0.2 plus or minus 0.02. So I think we're on sort of the upper limit of that, because we've got about 0.0, we've got about 0.22 on there. So I may just loosen that and just nip it up a touch. So we'll undo it, and I'll turn it about that much, and then we'll nip that up again. Now you may be tempted to not tighten these up too much. That would be a mistake, because you get a fair bit of vibration from, especially on a mower, because blades get built up of grass on there, they unbalance, the blades hit things and wear unevenly, so it can be a bit of a no-no to, and that all that vibration may make that come loose, and then your valve adjustment can just come too loose. It won't work for very long. So yeah, just make sure you nip them up. You don't have to tighten them up too much. You don't want to strip the thread, but you don't want it to come loose through vibration either. There's probably a torque specking for that, but I've just sort of do it until I get the wrench. I don't reef on that. Generally speaking, these are made for a certain torque from the leverage of how long they are. So if you just pull that till it stops from the end without reefing on it, that should be the torque for that nut. And that's how I tend to do it, unless it's something very important. Where are we? So we've got 0.1. I'll go to 0.18. See if that goes in there, because that's the minimum spec. And make sure nothing else there. That's a bit tight, so that can't get in there. So I've actually gone a little bit too far on that. So we'll loosen that off again. Back that off a touch. Okay, try that now. It's got a bit more, I can tell. And that hasn't quite got the squeak, so I think we're a bit looser. So I'll go to 0.2, see if I get the squeak. It still feels a little loose. Not too bad. I think that might be alright actually, because even though I'm not hearing the squeak, I can feel the resistance on the feeler gauge. So I think that'll be it for that. Alright. Now I really should replace that gasket, but because it's at the top and the oil will always go to the bottom, I don't think it's going to cause me any issues at this stage. I'll put these back on. Now, I don't know about you, but this mower, that is actually, that bolt is also doubles as the cover bolt, so I don't put that back on now. I have to replace the cover for that. I'll put these back in. Okay, now I've got this set on the lowest power rating. And they don't reef on it. As all that cover does is stop the oil coming out, basically. Alright, so we can have a look at this spark plug. It is quite dirty. Now this is the original spark plug that I took out of it, and I've cleaned it up, so, and it's not too bad. You can see the what I call it, the electrode. It's not all rounded, it's still fairly flat, similar to this one. If we can get them side by side and in focus, there we go. So this plug itself here, I don't think it's quite that old. Has been in there for a few years, but it is still functioning. So I'm going to put this plug back in, because I don't think the plug was the problem. We definitely had way too much valve clearance on the inlet valve, so that may have come loose a little and opened itself up again. So this looks okay, so I'm going to put this one back in and we'll give it a run with that, because it still looks pretty good to me how it's cleaned up. And like, as far as this one goes, this is, I just get a wire brush and I just gently run the wire brush over it, and the threads can't hurt, to clean up the threads a little bit. And as you can see, what was sooty is now, you know, reasonably clean, and that'll work fine. Okay, so we'll put that back in, and please don't over tighten your spark plug. You remember, you are going into an aluminium head, and when you look at the size of the leverage for this spark plug, the socket is huge, and you've got a lot of leverage, and you don't need it to be that tight. It's basically, that's it, just sort of from the end, and that's it. There's probably a torque setting, or there is a torque setting, I know there's a torque setting for it, torque setting for everything, but that's all you need, because it doesn't take much to strip that out, and you might as well, yeah, buy a new lawnmower for that matter. You're actually gonna have to pull it apart and drill it out, helicoil it. It's not worth it. Okay, so connect our spark plug on there, and this is always good fun, this part. Alright, so we're on there, that's okay. Now I won't do them up too tight. Hello, how are you? I'm a little busy. Good girl. Alright. Good girl. Good girl. Watch out. Careful, because you're going into aluminium. You need to keep that in mind. And because I think we're going to be fine, I'll actually do this one up at the back here. I'll just give this a bit of a dust off. Back. Put our cover on. Won't be any need to top it up, but I will just check my oil level just for the sake. I've got plenty of oil in there. Okay, give her a start up and have a listen. Okay, so I'm still getting that little bit of a stutter on the hard acceleration from idle. I think it's not as bad as it was. It started really easily, so that's a good sign. But what we'll do is I'll pull that plug out and we'll just check how that plug looks now, and that will probably should give us the best indication of how it's doing. Just be careful when you do take it out, because the plug's probably going to be hot from running on this, so it will be hot. Okay, so actually things have improved, because the plug is still pretty clean. It's on the rich side, but as you can see, it's not all sooted up. There we go, get the focus. So, and what I'll do is I'll give it a clean up. It was a little darker, but not a hell of a difference. Put the plug back in, and I'm going to put the new plug in this time just to see if there's a difference. Okay, we'll give that a crack. Okay, so it seems like we're still running rich, but I'm just going to try something here. I have another air filter. I'm going to put the new air filter on. Actually, just as a quick change, we'll remove the filter completely. I'm not mowing, I'm only going to do this for a quick test. We'll just see how it goes now. Okay, so big difference by removing the air filter. It seems like this air filter must be clogged up and time for a change. So I'm going to install a new air filter. I'm pretty sure I got one on the shelf, and we'll put a new air filter on it. Here's our new filter, our old filter. We'll just remove the cover. Have a new one. Looks like it goes on that way. There we go. Get our new cover. Okay. I'll keep that just in case. Alright, so there's your old filter. And when you look inside it, it doesn't look too bad, but during the summer, because we mow other people's lawns, some of the lawns are virtually just dirt and they only have small patches of grass in them, so the blades flick up a lot of dust, so there's a lot of dust getting sucked into the filter, blocks them up, I suppose. So that was part of the problem. It definitely wasn't the major problem, because that way too loose large valve gap on the inlet would definitely have been causing some issues. It was making it a bit hard at the start, wasn't too easy to start dead cold, and that could have been the reason. But definitely wasn't the spark plug. I'm going to fire it up now to make sure that with the new filter cleared we're still getting good, and then I'll replace that spark plug with the older one to see if I still get the same, if the engine still behaves the same as it does with the new one. If it doesn't, I will put the new one back in, and there must be something wrong with that old one. So we'll give it a test and see what happens. Okay, so air filter was the hard acceleration hesitation problem. And we had a large inlet valve gap, which was probably contributing to the hard cold start problem, and probably the bogging down when we come across some large grass. That wouldn't have been helping that situation either. So we'll remove the old spark plug now. And it has darkened up, and that's probably because it wasn't getting enough air, so it was running rich, which sort of led me to think that maybe the air cleaner was blocking up. So put the old one back in, and we'll see if we're still getting that rich. But I don't think so now, because we seem to be getting a lot better acceleration, so I think it was the And the reason I'm testing this now is because I know the engine starts fine, runs fine, and this will tell me if the spark plug's any good or not. And because if it's been suffering a blocked air filter for a while, that could have fouled the plug by running too rich for too long. We'll just see. Okay, I'm going to run that for a bit longer, just to see if that plug soots up or if it remains relatively clean, and that'll give me a good indication of whether my the air fuel, the mixture screw, needs any adjusting or not. I've never had to adjust it on this mower, and I've had it must be going on to 14 years, I'd say. So I'll run it for a while, I'll pull that plug back out again and we'll check it. Okay, so we run the mower for a bit, probably about 5 minutes. A good air fuel ratio, and oh, look at that. Okay, so I probably ran it for a shorter amount of time, last one, and as you can see, it almost looks exactly as I put it in. So our air fuel ratio has, if it will focus, no, bring it out here. There you go. Air fuel ratio is really good. So I don't have to play with the mixture screw. I didn't think I would have to because I've never had to do it before. So there we are. Our air fuel ratio is good. We're getting easy start. Now we're not getting that hesitation on hard acceleration from idle. So we've fixed all the problems. And it's just, there's not really a lot to go wrong with these things that aren't catastrophically a problem. So you've got spark, you've got fuel, and you've got air. It should run. It may run badly, and if that's the case, it could be, like we saw, a blocked air filter, or you could have some water in your fuel. Generally, the telltale for water in your fuel is it starts really easily, but then as you're mowing and you're moving the mower around, because you're mixing up the water that's in the fuel, the engine won't run very well with water mixed in the fuel, and eventually it'll conk out. That is a telltale sign, and I've had that problem before when I was younger. My house here, when I bought it, was just a block of land, and you had to mow it every so often. I did it by hand with a hand mower, and my father borrowed. He had about, well, as most dads do, they have about 2 or 3 mowers. My dad's a bit of a tinkerer, so he used to keep picking up mowers, and he'd fix them and then keep them as a spare. So he gave me a mower, and I used to keep my jerry can on a concrete floor in my garage, and little did I know that that's a problem, because the fuel will somehow, I don't ask me how it happens, but by sitting on the concrete, condensation gets inside the container, and that causes water to mix with your fuel. And I'd constantly taking the mower back to my father and say, "Oh, it's something wrong with it, Dad. It keeps conking out." So he'd give me his mower, and I'd use that, and he'd play around with the other one. And basically, all he did was he'd drain the fuel, put fresh fuel in it, and it would start working again. And he finally told me that he was doing this, and then he asked me, "Where am I keeping my fuel can?" And I said, "Oh, just in the garage." He goes, on the concrete floor?" I go, "Yeah, well, yeah." He goes, "Well, no, take it off the concrete floor, put it on a piece of wood, put it on a bench, a shelf, but don't leave it on the concrete floor." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, you must be getting water in your fuel because it's sitting on the concrete." And since then, I don't keep my jerry can on a concrete floor anymore. I always put it on a piece of wood, or I put it on a shelf, and I no longer have that problem of getting water in my fuel. Yeah, it's a strange one. If you can explain how it gets into there, by all means, put it in the comments. But yeah, I can. The only thing I can think of is that maybe because the concrete's cold, and from a hot day, the outside's hot, and you know how fuel tends to blow up. Maybe when I open it, hot air gets in and then the coldness on the floor makes it condensate. I really don't know. That's the only theory I've got. But anyway, that's working well now. We've solved our problems. I'll fit that back in. So there's nothing wrong with that old spark plug. So I'll just continue using that and keep the new one as a spare for when it does die. Remember, don't do these up too tight, just sort of lever it until it stops. Done. We're good to go. Now, just give it another check. And we're golden. Okay. Right, so we'll just recap on the problems that we had. Initially, I thought something was wrong with the mower because, one, it wasn't starting as easy as it used to. My wife mainly does the mowing when we do jobs. So she was telling me it's been harder to start. Plus, I mowed our grass today and found that it was a little difficult. Well, it wasn't impossible, I just had to give it a bit of a faster pull to get it started. But it did start. But it conked out shortly after I was mowing. And that was mainly because the plug, it wasn't wet, but it had a lot of carbon on it, which isn't normally an issue for this mower. So I changed the plug to the new one and it started and ran quite well. But then I noticed on large clumps of lawn, it would die down and struggle. And then it would sort of pick up speed again once it sort of got a bit more air. Right, so that was the issue. Hard starting and lack of power, I suppose, when labouring. So first thing I did was check the valves, and I did notice that when I checked the gaps on the valve clearance, inlet valve was almost double what it should be for the gap. The exhaust one, I thought it was loose, but it actually was very close. It was pretty much on the maximum clearance. So I brought that back a little bit to the middle of the clearance, what it should be. And those clearances again was 0.1 on the inlet, plus or minus 0.02, and 0.2 on the exhaust, plus or minus 0.02. So we're pretty much 0.1 and about 0.2 on the exhaust now, and starts really easily. So that solved the starting problem. But we were still labouring on, hesitating on hard acceleration from idle, and that was due to a blocked air cleaner, air filter. So we replaced the air filter, and that solved that problem of from idle to full acceleration hesitation. So that would lead me to believe once I come up a big clump of lawn, instead of labouring before it got going, hopefully it's just going to power through like it used to. And that's about it. The carbonising of the plug was due to the air cleaner, the air filter. There wasn't letting enough air into the engine, so we were running rich, and we were carbonising the fuel on the plug, which was sort of fouling the plug, and then it would obviously stop working completely on this plug that's in there now when I first tried to run it. That was probably due to the fact that it was already sooted up from previous use. So now we've checked the plug again after running it for about 5 minutes, and it's as clean as I put it in. So we're happy now, right? So there we go. Valve adjustment, air cleaner replacement, clean the plug, and we're good to go. Hope you've got something out of this, guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Please like and subscribe. See you later.